Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Joe Ellis. I'm a commercial wedding and portrait photographer in Dallas, Texas, and today we're talking about a new camera in my arsenal, the Fujifilm GFX 100S. This is a new medium format camera I'm adding to my camera kit, and I want to do 30 days, my first 30 days with this new camera. Let's get into it. Okay, welcome back. So longtime viewers of this channel will know that I have had and used a medium format digital camera for about the last 10 years. And the body that I've used is a Phase 1 645 DF Plus and an IQ 160 back. And while this is a fantastic camera and does an awesome job, it definitely has some limitations. But the point is that as a commercial photographer, there are certain times when extra resolution, dynamic range is either required by the client or it's simply needed because we know we're going to make extra large prints and we're going to want that extra detail. Now, that's not to say that I don't have tons of large prints made from 20 megapixel cameras in my home. This is simply something I do as a part of my job, part of my career, delivering the very best I can for my clients. So for certain jobs, medium format digital is awesome. Now, I want to talk about this new camera, the GFX 100S. This thing is amazing. It really increases the shooting envelope with which you can use these cameras. When you are shooting with a Phase 1, at least in my experience, there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. You have to use the camera on a tripod. You have to be really aware of the where the autofocus is gone because it's not that accurate or that sophisticated. You have to bring in extra light a lot of the time because you can't raise the ISO that high. So in using this camera, it really dictates a lot of the things that you're capable of doing on the shoot. With the Fuji GFX 100S, it takes all of that away. This camera is fast enough, smart enough, modern enough to tackle any job. And so that's a real revelation in the medium format world. And I think that's amazing. Today, March 11, 2021, is launch day for the Fujifilm GFX 100S. I just got my camera from Competitive Cameras in Dallas, Texas. Shout out to Eugene and all the guys down there for getting me this camera so quickly. And I have to say, after running out and doing a shoot with my kids as the very first thing with this camera, I think it's pretty amazing. Okay, so we're back from the shoot. And first things first, I would say the build quality of this camera is absolutely outstanding. I think it's very much in the same vein as the regular GFX 100, minus the vertical grip. And before picking up this camera, I was a little nervous because I don't like cameras where when I hold them, my pinky fingers are falling off the end. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'4". I've got pretty big hands, and this camera fits me like a glove. I don't have anything falling off the end, which makes the ergonomics really great. And in comparison to the GFX 100, if I'm going to carry around a camera for 10 hours on a wedding day or a really long shoot, I would vastly prefer this size body. And I think that's a great addition to the GFX lineup. Okay. So, interesting story, right? In shooting with this camera, with the Phase 1 camera over the years, I would find almost always when I came home from a shoot that I took about half the number of photographs that I did with other cameras, whether those were Canons or OMDs or whatever it might be. And the reason, I think, was dictated by the speed of the camera. Between the pace between shooting pictures, just the speed of the camera recycling, and the autofocus, and just generally worrying about making sure that everything is sharp, it really slowed me down. And so I would say after shooting with this camera on one shoot, I can tell you this is not the case with the GFX 100S. If you normally shoot 500 pictures on an engagement session, you're going to come home with the same number of files with this camera. Now, I just want to warn you, if you shoot 500, 102 megapixel RAW files, be prepared because that is a lot of data. Okay, AF accuracy. Just in shooting a couple of times with this camera and just sort of getting to know it, I would say that the AF accuracy for static subjects is near 100%. Even shooting at 102 millimeters at f2, I tend to turn on the face detect and eye detect. Both of those did a great job. I didn't have any misses when I was out there. I still have to investigate the continuous autofocus. I tried a little bit while we were on location and didn't have great results, but I think that some tweaking and some learning on my part is definitely going to be needed to kind of get that accuracy up. Okay, many of the controls in this camera are going to be familiar to Fuji shooters. If you are looking to step up from an X series body into a 100S, that's going to be a really easy transition. I had this camera set up in 2 to 3 minutes with all the things that are really critical to me, where I put my white balance, how I set up my focus settings, turning on back button focus, and so forth. It's a camera that really likes to get out of your way. I would say all the muss and fuss of having to set up a camera and go through millions of menus to get everything the way you want it is not an experience you're going to have with the 100S. Probably you're going to get this camera, it'll take 5 minutes to go through and make your settings changes, and then it's just going to be there and it's just going to work without you really having to think about it. Okay, a couple of little things. I love that the SCM switch for the camera is on the back. I really don't like on X series bodies that the switch from continuous to single autofocus is down here on the front of the camera. On this camera, it's right here under your thumb on the back, and that makes going between the modes that much quicker. That's awesome. I do wish it had a 4-way pad on the back. A lot of cameras these days have the sort of the 4 arrows on the back of the camera, and you can shoot hit the OK button is in the middle. This camera, you have a focus joystick, which is great, and you can use that for navigating the menus and selecting items and all that kind of good stuff. But it's a bit of a muscle memory for me to have a 4-way switch, and this is definitely new. So that's something I'm going to have to get used to. The screen on top of this camera is totally baller compared to what we have had in the past. If you are used to the 80s calculator style displays on the top of your camera, this is a whole new world, right? This little OLED display can display different types of information in different layouts. It can show you a histogram, and it's just awesome. It also stays on all the time, even when the camera is off, which is something new to me. I'm getting a little bit used to that as I put it in the bag, thinking, oh, I forgot to turn the camera off. But otherwise, I would say it's a great addition to just being easy to use at a glance information. The flip screen on the back of the camera is really great for shooting stills. It flips out straight behind the camera instead of to the side, which really helps with being incognito if you want to use the camera from waist level. And I think that is a great thing for still shooters. It's probably not the best overall design if you use your camera for both stills and video. But as I see myself mainly being a still shooter with this camera, I think that's a great place to put it for somebody who is looking to use the camera screen in various ways while shooting stills, in comparison to the flip screen where people know what you're doing and they can see it out there on the side. I know the EVF in this camera is supposed to be not quite as good as the one in the GFX 100. I have to say, unless you're A-Bing them side by side and you have both camera bodies, to me this is a non-issue. I shot with this camera for a couple of hours. The EVF was fantastic, and I didn't really notice any problems there. So if you have any worries about it being somehow not as good as the GFX 100 and how that might affect your work, I would say it's probably a non-issue. Okay, so the last thing I want to share with you guys here, and I'm going to bring up a computer screen, is I want to share a couple of pictures I took. I wanted to compare the Fujifilm 56mm 1.2 to the 110mm f2 at the same distance, just to show the differences in depth of field. I was curious myself as to kind of how that would look. Different apertures, but similar focal length in terms of field of view. And so here on the screen, you can see a picture of my daughter shot. I didn't move and she didn't move. I just simply switched cameras and lenses, and you can judge for yourself. It's definitely more shallow on the 110, even at f2. I love the way that it falls off into the background. And of course, with all that sharpness and color fidelity there, it's just a really fantastic file. And that is no knock on the 56mm 1.2. That's also producing a beautiful picture, but certainly you can see the difference that it makes to be in medium format. Okay, so just to sum up, day one here with the GFX 100S, I would say I'm very excited about this camera. I am most excited about just all the places that we can put this camera now, because we know it can perform in a way that is on par with any other modern camera. I think it's going to be a great addition to wedding days. And like I said, I'm going to use it for lots of those critical photos, lots of those artistic photos where I really would love to have the extra color, the extra resolution. And if I need to go in and crop a photo afterwards, if the client suddenly goes, hey, we really like to do a long panoramic print of that picture, I can go in and recrop that photograph without having to think about it ahead of time. If you're shooting details at a wedding reception and you need to take a vertical and make that the full page of some article, you can without ever thinking about it. You can also shoot this camera all the way up into the hundreds of thousands of ISO, and it still produces really beautiful and usable files, and that is a revelation as well. So if you are on the fence about having a GFX 100S in your kit and you want to talk about it, hit me up in the comments, and I'll be doing 30 days of videos sort of with this camera and my initial impressions and kind of using it in all the assignments that I have coming up. So stay tuned for that. And if you've made it to the end of this video, I want to say two things. I've been taking a few months break from YouTube, so this is my first video back, and I want to give a shout out to everybody who's reached out in that time period just to say hey and see how we were doing. I really do appreciate that. I also want to say that I still have my Micro Four Thirds gear. That's not going anywhere. One of the things that we've had to do during this pandemic is kind of reinvent and relearn learn some new skills. And one of those has been doing a lot more video. And my Micro Four Thirds gear is doing a lot of video work these days. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to talk about here in 2021 is how as assignments come in, we're finding more and more that we're doing both photo and stills, both stills and video for a lot of those assignments. I think that's going to be a trend that's going to be really important moving forward. So if you like this content, you want to hear more about the GFX 100S, or you have things that you want to talk about in the comments, then please hit the notification bell, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.